Another microphone, another monologue, another medal in the self-made misery pageant. But this time it wasn't Meghan Markle holding the mic. It wasn't Harry sighing into a memoir. It was Justine Bateman, and she wasn't here for pity. She came with a torch. It happened quietly, just a Substack essay, no Netflix, no Oprah, no dramatic camera pan to a tear. Just words, precise, surgical. It's not what she's doing, it's the victim Olympics road she took to get there. Boom. That line exploded across social media like a crack across glass. And for the first time in years, someone from Hollywood not only saw through the Sussex smog, but had the guts to name it. Bateman wasn't ranting, she was dissecting. She wasn't slamming Meghan for launching a jam brand, a podcast, a new surname, a Netflix deal. She was asking, why does every career move require a prelude of public suffering? Why is every endeavor padded with an origin story of trauma, of cruelty, of royal injustice recycled for the 10th time like an old curtain worn thin? Why after 5 years is the only reliable launch strategy to repackage pain and sell it with limited edition packaging? Bateman coined the term Victim Olympics. And suddenly what many had been whispering in forums and subreddits, someone finally said out loud, in bold, in italics, with real-world references. We are all allowed to suffer. But when suffering becomes the business model, the audience stops feeling and starts flinching. That was the undertone of her critique. Not that Harry and Meghan had no pain, but that they seemed to have only pain, pain repeated, pain leveraged, pain monetized, as if the more you re-air it, the more the world owes you another listen. And the world isn't listening, not like before. Not when Spare felt recycled. Not when the podcast had to be canceled. Not when With Love Meghan couldn't even crack Netflix's top 300. Bateman didn't come for blood, she came for context. She questioned the narrative's form, not its pain. There's a difference between telling your story and franchising it, between vulnerability and pattern, and Bateman's essay held up a mirror that no PR team could fog up. She wrote as one of them, an actress, a woman, someone who knows what it is to be dissected, reduced pressure to justify existence through suffering. That made her words cut deeper, because they came not from malice but from fatigue. Hollywood fatigue, audience fatigue, feminist fatigue. The fatigue of watching two people who escaped the monarchy turn that escape into a streaming franchise where every episode features another medal for surviving their own choices. Bateman didn't just talk about Meghan. She talked about a cultural shift, a public that had once clapped for truth and now was looking for the exit. Not because it stopped caring, but because the story stopped changing. And when a story stops evolving, it turns into a loop. A victim loop, a competition no one signed up to judge. And still Meghan plays. Harry plays. They stand atop a podium they constructed from interview clips and slow-motion flashbacks. But this time someone in the stands said, "We're not watching anymore." And it wasn't Piers Morgan. It wasn't Megyn Kelly. It wasn't the Daily Mail. It was a woman with no axe to grind and no need for palace access. Just a keyboard and enough courage to call a trope what it had become strategy. And that's the crack in the mask. Not that Meghan suffered, but that suffering repeated enough stops sounding like memory and start sounding like marketing. Justine Bateman didn't cancel Meghan. She didn't exile Harry. She just pointed at the stage and asked the question no one in the audience had the nerve to. Are we really still doing this? And the echo was louder than any applause. Justine Bateman didn't shout. She sighed the collective sigh of an audience that had clapped for too long. When her essay dropped in March 2025, it didn't sound like scandal. It sounded like someone finally saying what the crowd was whispering. We're not mad, we're just done. It wasn't just about Meghan and Harry. It was about the exhaustion they'd come to represent. Exhaustion with the repetition, with every project framed by the same 3-act structure. We were mistreated. We survived. Now buy our truth. The formula was familiar, predictable, exhausting. Bateman tapped into that fatigue with surgical precision. Her term Victim Olympics didn't just stick, it resonated. Reddit threads lit up, Substack comments exploded. Even users who once defended Meghan said, "She had us at Oprah, lost us at Lifestyle Jam." Because it wasn't just the pain. It was the packaging, the Spotify deals, the Netflix docudramas, the brand pivots always accompanied by emotional flashbacks. To Bateman, it was no longer about healing, it was about harvesting. She highlighted the moment Harry and Meghan showed up at the Palisades fire zone in California. No, they didn't live there. No, they weren't officials. They were, in her words, some disaster tourists, ambulance chasers with camera crews. And for many Americans, that was the tipping point. Not because they were there, but because they were seen, always performing empathy, until empathy felt like branding. Bateman's point wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. Not all pain is PR, but when it always accompanies press, people start to wonder. And wonder they did. Joe Victim Olympics trended. YouTube commentary channels jumped in. Podcast hosts quoted her. TikToks used her quote as a sound. And Meghan, she stayed silent. But silence, as Bateman knew, isn't always power. Sometimes it's just empty. Because when people stop reposting your truth and start reposting your critics, that's not a backlash. It's a shift. A cultural shrug, a quiet unsubscribe. Bateman's words didn't start that shift. They confirmed it. She was the woman who said aloud what millions were feeling. We wanted to believe you. We did believe you. But we don't want another round. We want a new story. And that perhaps is the greatest risk Harry and Meghan face. Not scandal, not cancellation, but irrelevance. Because even the most dramatic stage can't hold attention if the script never changes. And Bateman didn't burn that stage. She just turned the lights up and showed us the set hadn't changed since 2020. And the actors still reading the same lines. There was a time when Meghan Markle could freeze the news cycle with a pause, a tear, a sigh. There was a time when Prince Harry was the world's favorite rebel prince, the soldier, the survivor, the son who broke the rules. There was a time when their story felt raw, personal, necessary. That time has passed. Now the spotlight they once owned feels like it's working against them. Not because they've changed, but because everyone else has. Audiences evolve, narratives demand movement. And Harry and Meghan, they've stayed in Act 1. It's not just the message, it's the medium. Netflix, Spotify, docuseries, memoirs, everything framed with the same opening line. We were wrong. And the same closing line, now we're healing. But healing never quite arrives. Because there's always another flashback, another interview, another trauma remembered just in time for a launch. The repetition isn't just tiring, it's parody-ready. TikTok comedians recreate scenes from Harry and Meghan with water glasses and fake tears. YouTubers dub over Oprah footage with new taglines. Tell us how hard it is again, Markle, for content. Even late-night hosts, once sympathetic, now raise eyebrows instead of glasses. And in the middle of this shift, Harry has faded into the loyal shadow. Once the wild card, now the echo. His role to nod, to affirm, to co-author the script of shared pain. But the co-author rarely gets the credit, and often gets the criticism. Because when you repeat the same truth too many times, it stops sounding like experience, and starts sounding like marketing. And audiences don't like to feel marketed at, especially by people who insist they never wanted the attention. Bateman's term Victim Olympics took that sentiment and crystallized it. Not as attack, but as observation. And it was brutal because it was accurate. The stage they built is still standing. But the applause has been replaced by commentary. And commentary by mockery. It's not cruelty, it's consequence. A narrative repeated without evolution becomes self-sabotage. And for Harry and Meghan, the danger isn't a rogue journalist. It's that they're still giving the same interview. We know the beats. The press was cruel. The palace was cold. The protocol was suffocating. The pain was deep. The silence was survival. But what comes next? What have they become? The public doesn't know. Because the couple keeps rewinding the tape. And even the most empathetic viewer will change the channel if the episode reruns for the 5th time. Especially if it now ends with a failed Spotify deal, a $100 million Netflix ghost contract, a lifestyle brand that launches with a jar of jam. Meghan's smile once disarmed. Now it feels rehearsed. Harry's eyes once haunted. Now they look tired. Of the cameras, of the script, or of the loop they can't seem to escape. No one knows, because they won't let us in any deeper than the surface they control. And in that tightly curated surface, they become easy to imitate. And in modern culture, imitation isn't flattery. It's a sign you've gone from story to spectacle. In a culture obsessed with outrage, it's a miracle when someone criticizes a public figure and doesn't get buried under hashtags. But when Justine Bateman went after Harry and Meghan, there was no mob, no meltdown, no cancel storm. Instead, there was applause. And that's the part that hurts more than any insult ever could. Bateman didn't land a cheap shot. She landed a calibrated truth. And the reason it worked because she wasn't punching down, she was speaking across. Bateman isn't a tabloid. She isn't Piers Morgan or Megyn Kelly. She isn't a royal biographer with an axe to grind. She's a woman in Hollywood who knows how media works, knows how fame distorts, knows what it looks like when pain becomes product. Because she's seen it, she's lived it, she's walked away from it. Her critique didn't sound jealous, it sounded tired. Not bitter, but blunt. The kind of clarity you can only get when you're not trying to be liked. That's why it landed. Bateman has no book to promote, no political campaign to run, no royal blood to protect. She didn't monetize her critique, she just wrote it. That's rare. And in a world where almost every critic has a side hustle, Bateman's essay felt like a mirror, not a transaction. And that authenticity, it disarmed people. Even those who supported Meghan found themselves nodding, not because they turned against her, but because they finally saw why they were turning away. Bateman's power wasn't volume, it was timing. She spoke when the room was already silent, when the sympathy had turned into discomfort, when the applause had become awkward. She didn't change the mood, she just named it. And once it was named, people couldn't unhear it. That's why she wasn't canceled. Because what she said wasn't scandalous. It was overdue. In a world of curated activism where every tear is framed, every sigh edited, and every trauma timed with a drop date, Bateman's words felt like a break in the stream, a reset, a reminder that stories need stakes, not just sequels. She didn't call Meghan a fraud, she called the formula tired. She didn't say Harry had no pain, she said his pain had become repetitive. She didn't mock their choices, she questioned the packaging. And that nuance rare, valuable, uncancelable. Because Bateman spoke not like a troll, not like a rival, but like a witness to a pattern that too many had chosen to politely ignore. Until now, they won, Harry and Meghan won, they told their truth, they escaped the system, they got the Netflix deal, the Spotify partnership, the book advances. They stood on the podium holding medals minted from pain. And for a while, the world applauded. But medals weigh something, especially when worn too long. Eventually, they don't shine, they drag. That's what Justine Bateman exposed. Not a scandal, not a conspiracy, just the quiet truth. The weight of being a victim doesn't stay noble forever. It becomes maintenance. It requires polishing, retelling, packaging. And eventually, people stop seeing the medal. They see the effort to make it glint. In her essay, Bateman didn't strip them of pain. She stripped them of pretext. She asked, if you're still hurting, fine, but why is every hurt followed by a camera crew? Why does every moment of reflection feel choreographed? Why does empathy feel scheduled? The answer, no one gave one. Because no one could. Not without admitting what Bateman already had, that there comes a point where pain becomes posture, and posture, when repeated too long, becomes parody. So where does this leave them? Harry, still loyal, still fading, still flinching on cue. Meghan, still polished, still poised, still performing pain with practiced grace. And the public scrolling past, looking for a new story. The Victim Olympics aren't canceled, they're just tired. The podium is empty, the judges left the arena, and the medals, well, they're starting to rust. So now the question is yours. Not to Harry, not to Meghan, to you, whose story still holds weight, who still deserves a listen, and who needs to stop repeating Act 1. Drop your side. Certain Team Bateman. Finally, someone said what we were all thinking. Sir, Team Meghan, she earned that medal. Team Overeat, enough déjà vu, time for new characters. Because in 2025, truth isn't just what you say, it's what people still believe. And belief has a shelf life too.